having all our eggs in that basket was also a bit of a risk because
it seems like the threat of competition is present. Is that something that you think about?
And that had gone from 2K a month to like 80K a month.
Could you walk us through those 2 weeks launching YouTuber Academy?
We were making about as much money, but it was costing us 3 times more.
My guest today is Angus Parker. He is the longtime general manager for Ali Abdaal and all things Ali Abdaal. Angus, the first thing I wanted to ask you about is there's been so many businesses over the past 7 or 8 years that have just kind of spawned from the YouTube channel. The one I want to talk about in particular is one that's it seems to be quite popular in the content, and it seems to be riding quite a long wave. It's VoicePal. Can you tell me the very first time that VoicePal fell onto your plate? Like, what were those earliest conversations like, and how has it evolved over time?
Firstly, thanks for having me. And secondly, with VoicePal, it honestly started as a bit of a side project for Ali and the kind of co-founder Pablo.
For context, how do you describe exactly what VoicePal is, just for people who aren't aware?
I mean, the tagline is like an AI ghostwriter in your pocket. It really helps turn, and I guess a TLDR is it turns your speech into a clean text that can be used for, people use it for all kinds of things. Ali uses it for helping write his newsletter. Other creators use it for helping write their books, like first drafts that they can then put into Claude and clean up. Other people are using it just to create task lists, to-do lists. That's kind of more of an edge case, but for creators, it's really about creating the written content that otherwise they would struggle to do when they're looking at a blank page. A lot of people, including Ali, find it much easier to kind of walk and talk rather than sit and stare.
I completely agree.
What VoicePal solves for, and that's really what Ali wanted to solve for when designing it. When he still lived in London, he would go on walks in Hyde Park, and I think that's really where he wanted to be able to speak out his thoughts and in a way that was not just getting kind of back a transcript with ums and ahs and everything like that, but actually something clean. And one of the other benefits that people have found with it is like the follow-up questions that it gives people too, which allows you then to take the thought and the idea that bit further. Basically, kind of, we're not going for like a swing for the fences Notion compressor or anything like that. Like, it's not, our aim is not to build an all-in-one productivity tool. Our aim is not to raise money. It's just I guess we've kind of seen that, with the advance of AI and everything else that everyone knows about, and to go into that, the relative value of distribution and trust is going to become even more important and valuable. And if you can offer that distribution with a product that is much more scalable than necessarily digital products and also has enterprise value, which our courses and other digital products don't really have, then that's really where I think there's going to be a lot of success in the near future for creators.
How novel was that idea in late 2023 when it was first getting developed?
Speech-to-text apps and tools have always been around to a certain extent, so the novelty potentially not. I think the ability to leverage AI, which, it seems funny now, but like even 18 months ago was in a very different place to where it is now, was potentially one of the more novel aspects. But even then, there are other speech-to-text tools that are AI infused. I think where it's really different from our perspective is in the sort of the shadow reader and the questions that people get back and that kind of thing, the interactivity of it. And I think often people, especially on new business ideas, they're trying to find something that is novel. It can't be new, can't be done in any way before. And that ends up leading to just this paralysis of trying to work out where there is a gap that no one's ever seen. And sometimes that's possible, but sometimes it just needs, the right feature within a product and the right distribution to be able to get it going. And yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's going really well. Every time that I speak with you, it sounds like, oh yeah, we're getting bigger and bigger. The audience is becoming less focused on Ali Abdaal and more about people who haven't even heard about him. These are all great signs. And this is coming at a time when AI is thriving and growing and changing in a bunch of different ways. And it seems like the threat of competition is present. Is that something that you think about? Is that something that you worry about with this product?
Not really. And I kind of have got less and less worried about it over the past 6 to 8 months, to be honest, because before this year, I've not really been involved in any app-related marketing. It's a space that we had never really dived into, and it was just, I knew it existed, but I'd not really looked into it. The more I've looked into it, the more I've realized that there are just there are so many apps out there, and there are so many apps that are doing ridiculously well.
Sure.
With very little distribution, but just the right, either the right feature set, or they've had the right break from a TikTok video that's gone viral. Like, there's so much space in the market, I think, that I'm not overly concerned. I think if, you know, an OpenAI came out with exactly the feature set that VoicePal has, then yes, maybe it's like, okay, well, suddenly there's an issue. But the chance of them doing that is actually relatively low, I would suspect, given they've got bigger things to worry about.
Right.
So it's, to a certain extent, yes, there's always a threat of competition. There's always a threat that the bigger players could suddenly see the feature you've got is really what they need. But I think it's quite unlikely, and there's just so much space and so many people.
Thank you for going down this path with me. I wanted to talk about VoicePal because it leads to a bigger picture about the Ali Abdaal business philosophy, I think. And that is, Ali is much more, and you in turn, and everybody on the team seems to be very, very experimental in launching small businesses. I think that goes against the norm of what is kind of the usual grind in this YouTube space, where people build up to build a single big product and then they run and they milk that as long as possible. You're doing it oppositely. So I want to kind of get your perspective on the philosophy around starting a business from Ali Abdaal's team.
Internally, we move very fast, and there are a lot of things that, you know, get scrapped after they've been developed for a bit, and things like that. That's pretty standard, but I never see us as releasing a lot of new products, really. We test a lot, and I guess from the outside it might look like we are releasing a lot of products, but I think that is just the general speed with which we move, and we want to move. I mean, even with like the YouTuber Academy, it was sort of 2 weeks from idea to the first cohort launching.
That's crazy.
And yeah,
like that's insane to me.
Yeah.
Like with Mark Mansa, we've spent a year and a half basically building out the big product that we've launched this year. And with my the guy that I worked with previously, we also spent a ton of time launching this program that ultimately didn't really fizzle out that well, but so much time and energy was spent on it. And it sounds like, okay, 2 weeks until we've launched, you know, the Part-Time YouTuber Academy, which is, you know, insanely fast.
Yeah, and when I look at our most successful products, which I guess the YouTuber Academy is the most successful one, they've always come from that level of speed, if I'm honest. Like the ones that haven't worked as well, you know, like the keyboard and the physical product brand that we had, that was a product that took like 18 months to 2 years to develop. And you know, it's a physical product, it's always going to take longer, and there's more to do on that front. But there's also more back and forth and more, you know, adjustments and amendments that need to be made. I mean, even down to something like we did a kind of skin case thing with D Brown like 3 or 4 years ago, and that was fine and quite well, but that was literally a 3-week kind of turnaround, and obviously a lot of it was on them. But again, it wasn't like one of our most successful products. But I guess the point I'm making is I think there does seem to be a correlation with speed and success, because I do think if you spend time thinking about it, you end up overthinking it and then kind of going around in circles, and to a certain extent the amount you can iterate is just exponentially increased by launching, like just launching and getting feedback from people. We did that with PTYA. Our whole idea with that first cohort was started to get like 220 people into like a group that we could then improve the course on. 300 people ended up signing up, and so like that was a very good data set. But I think we set like, and I can't really take credit for that, because that's definitely been driven by Ali. Ali's always driving forward this kind of speed mentality, not recklessness, I wouldn't say at all, but more, you know, let's just launch it, let's just see what happens. And whilst there is a degree to which he is frustrating in sometimes like changing his mind, I often use the analogy of like a boat, and he often thinks he's on a speedboat when we've actually got like a cruise ship, and it can't just change like course without some degree of disruption. But it's also the benefit that we've had by keeping the team relatively lean. Even when we expanded a bit, like it's allowed us to be that flexible, and we're always very keen to try new things, and but with an eye to the future and an eye to thinking about what it means from a business model perspective in terms of resilience as well, which I think will be more important, you know, as Ali, you know, to start a family and there's other commitments and responsibilities and things. We want to create a business that's not totally reliant on him, ideally. We can't get away from the fact that it will be forever somewhat reliant on him and him making videos. And there is still a large reliance on, you know, videos coming out on the YouTube channel. The business would struggle to survive if he just decided he didn't want to publish videos for a year. But at the same time, it's all about for us like just building in those different income streams that allow us to hold things up and not have to rely on a video going out every week or every other week.
2 follow-up questions. I'm still like hung up on the 2 weeks to launch thing. Could you walk us through those 2 weeks from the time you came up with the idea to launching YouTuber Academy? The second question was, could you also give us like a little bit of a big picture overview of like the business and business model?
Yeah, so with the YouTube Academy, so this is back in October 2020. Ali had put out a tweet like 3 or 4 weeks earlier about like why aren't people starting a YouTube channel, essentially. And it was a fairly like throwaway tweet in the sense of it wasn't done with the intent of like creating a course around it. But any course that we were going to create was potentially going to be like a self-paced course. We had launched on Skillshare about 6 months earlier, and that had gone from 2K a month to like 80K a month in the space of a few months. It was a ridiculous amount of money coming from Skillshare. But that
what was your audience size at that time?
He passed 1 million subscribers in August of that year. So Skillshare at that point was just very lucrative for us in terms of revenue. But we also recognized that just like we'd moved onto Skillshare to get away from relying on YouTube, Skillshare is still a third-party platform. And we knew that having all our eggs in that basket was also a bit of a risk because, you know, they could change their monetization policies, as they did. And we went from earning 80K a month to like, I mean, now it's down at 4K. So it's quite significantly lower. We have taken a couple of classes off, so that's to be fair. But and that's obviously within their right, and I don't have anything against them for doing that. But it means that you're outside of your control. So all that to say, we knew we wanted to create our own thing. Ali had a chat with Thiago Forte and David Perel, who had their own like live courses, and so suddenly it was like, actually, let's do a live cohort. And so I went over to, we both lived in Cambridge. I went over to Ali's flat on October the 20th. I can't remember the date. We really, over the next week or so, did a lot of sort of building in public. Ali was tweeting a lot during that time, getting feedback on the name. I remember when we first chose Parts of YouTube Academy, I wasn't in favor of that name. I can't remember what the others were, but I was like, I don't think this is right. I'm glad I was wrong. And we essentially went from like ideation to putting the kind of curriculum together over about a week. And that was essentially just him and I having calls more or less like 24/7, because that was really the sole focus at that point. We didn't have any other products. It was just that. We worked with like a curriculum designer as well for a bit then. And then we launched it, I think, probably like first week of November it must have launched.
How did you know to bring in a curriculum designer? Did you just realize it was a blind spot between the two of you and you said, we need somebody else?
I think we had been, I think it was more just a suggestion from someone that it would be useful to actually get some, like just a consultant to help with that. You know, we'd not built a course or done a live cohort before.
It makes a lot of sense, but when you're like deep in the moment like that, it's hard to realize, oh, someone else could help me solve my problem so much earlier.
Yeah. And it was just useful to get like a third party perspective on that as well. And yeah, so we launched like start of November. Again, we kind of kept it very conservative with the prices at that point. It was like a few $100s, like it wasn't much at all compared to where it ended up being. Yeah, it was a weird kind of moment when we were on the call and we put it live, and I can't remember what the exact numbers were, but I think it was about 80K in an hour.
Insane.
And yeah, it was mad. Like it was completely insane. The first cohort was 4 weeks, and basically just iterated on that for another 8 cohorts before we eventually turned it off from a cohort model onto a self-paced model. But yeah, that's what those 2 weeks looked like really. And again, it was very much bias to action, launch and iterate and see and get feedback and that kind of thing. And then in terms of like the overall business model, I generally see the business when I'm kind of looking at it is really being split into 2 main areas. It's sort of content and commercial. For me, all of the sponsorship and AdSense like still falls under like the content bucket, and the commercial is really just the digital products, the courses, the apps, anything that's not basically the content. But yeah, so that's kind of how I generally kind of divide it and how we've always seen the 2 sort of teams within the business. We have people on the commercial side managing marketing, product delivery, community, all of that, and then we have the content team, which is essentially YouTube and social media and things like that. And I sort of straddle the 2 and I manage the partnerships and things like that. So that's where the content side really has an element of commercial element to it. But yeah, that on a very high level, that's kind of how I see the business. And fundamentally, we have always wanted to move towards a place whereby we could have the content team kind of surviving off the commercial team, but the content team providing the marketing for that.
Right.
Ideally, we'd get to a point where the courses, the apps were making enough that Ali could make videos as and when he wants, and the sponsors would essentially be our own products. And then you've got a really nice flywheel whereby produce more content, provide marketing for the courses, and that hasn't happened yet, or exactly in the way that we would want, as I said, yet. And we're still working with sponsors on the main channel, and there's no intention of changing that in any time soon. But I think in an ideal world, in the business that Ali would really want to make, that fundamentally doesn't have a requirement or a deadline, because he hates deadlines, then we would get to a stage whereby we were just sort of promoting our own products in a way that felt like authentic and things, and then those own products then funded the kind of content being produced and stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of like the go-to strategy from what I'm hearing in the educational space, where it's like the content itself isn't necessarily profitable. It maybe breaks even if you're pretty lucky with the sponsors and stuff. At least that's what we've seen. And then it's the other products that are built around it that you use to, pay for the whole big enterprise.
I always like seeing kind of the sponsorship revenue for the channel as kind of our recurring revenue piece. So I have seen that for the past few years. It's like, we know we can, if Ali's able to produce 8 videos, in all likelihood, we can get most, if not all of them, sponsored. And so there is a degree to which there's a nice, comforting element to that I've always found with the content side, that we've got that recurring piece. And obviously AdSense is not necessarily recurring because it's not always the same, but it's always going to be there with a large channel like Ali's or like Mark's. Like, there's always something coming in from that perspective. We only have one very new kind of recurring product. Previously, when it's a self-paced course or any kind of digital product like that, it's always like, okay, new month, sales start again. And so having some kind of recurring piece, which again is another reason why we're going down the app route, is it solves so many questions and concerns and anxieties.
Did you mention your team size for both content? Like, you mentioned kind of like the org chart, but how many people specifically do you have on the content side and also on the business side?
So we've gone from, as I mentioned earlier, 4 in 2020 to 19 in 2021, back down to 13 for sort of a couple of years after that, back up to 20, and now down to 10.
Oh my gosh! Okay.
So we're now
There's a story there somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah. So the YouTube Academy went very well, and it was throughout 2021 that we really started to then use the money that was generating to hire more. We initially hired some more writers to basically replace me so that I could concentrate more on the academy. And throughout 2021, we read a book called Traction, took the kind of Kool-Aid from that, started creating an actual org chart and an org structure. But the mistake we made then was creating that chart and then thinking we need a person for each of these seats, rather than thinking we're still a startup. It's fine if Angus is wearing 5 hats and Gareth is wearing 2 and Yakov's wearing 1, or 3. That's actually quite fine. And instead we sort of hired for every role, and we got halfway through 2022 and we realized that we were kind of making about as much money, but it was costing us 3 times more. And so we kind of shrunk the team back down to 12 or 13. And that's kind of where we stayed for a couple of years. And then as we launched another product last year and we hired more people to run that product, we kind of started to expand again, made that mistake of going past the kind of 13, 14 person mark, which we've been told numerous times that there's always an element to which in that space between 12, 13 and 40, you're in a weird zone where Daniel Priestley, who's a kind of one of our coaches, calls it the desert, because you're too big to be small, you're too small to be big. You need to have layers of management, but equally at the size of 15 to 20 people, it's actually layers of management end up causing more problems than they solve for, even though one person can't be managing everyone. So you're in this weird space whereby if you can go from 13 to 40 almost immediately, which some companies do, obviously if they're growing and expanding, then great. And I'm not saying that businesses can't work in that zone, but I think it's hard. We noticed that nothing necessarily broke when we went into that space, but communication lines suddenly became trickier, not in the sense of animosity or anything like that, but more just certain areas of the business suddenly didn't know what other parts of the business were doing on a daily or weekly basis, and everything sort of just slows down. And so we're now back down to 10, and that just feels like a more sensible number. It feels like the right size, really. And also, just from my own perspective, anxieties around overheads and things like that are now much reduced on a monthly basis. And just even from a Zoom perspective, everyone's suddenly on one screen. You don't
Right.
have to scroll across the screen.
And that's all that's important.
And that,
just being able to see
yeah,
everybody's
well,
faces.
It is to a certain extent, and it's a good sort of, it's almost like a good indicator of like whether you have the right team size, I think, especially in a small business like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are you thoughtful about whether or not to expand or to bring on a new team member now, having gone up and down like the way that you just did?
How do we know really depends on how successful we see that opportunity being.
Okay.
We made the bet last year that the kind of productivity product would be probably more successful than it has been. It's still been relatively successful. So there's a degree to which like you need to sort of do some level of forecasting as to just really what you'd expect from this. I think one lesson that I have learned and we are trying to sort of employ moving forwards is moving more towards a just-in-time method of hiring rather than just in case. I think in the past it's been like, oh, we're building this product, let's hire this person just in case because we think that we can't take it on ourselves or that kind of thing, rather than, okay, we've really got to a point where everyone is so stretched that we need to bring someone on. And you could argue that that's actually a bad place to be because it might take a few months to hire someone and suddenly like things break. But I don't necessarily agree with that because I think you can bring on freelancers, contractors to cover things if needs be. And so that's kind of the approach we have now, is really just in case. We have a couple of other people who are on sort of 2 or 3 days a week contractors, and that feels like a much more sustainable position to be in. So yeah, it's kind of more thinking in that realm.
The Ali Abdaal team has kind of made a name for itself in terms of people working behind the scenes who have gained a bit of a reputation for themselves. Like, you are kind of known in the space now for your work with Ali, but there's also been people like Tintin Smith, who, is kind of become popular as his own thing. And there's Saf as well, who used to be the creative director, and he's gone off done his own thing. You're smiling, like this is cool to see. Like, these probably are friends of yours and you're excited to see them succeed. The question I kind of want to get to is like, what's the philosophy around helping behind the scenes employees kind of succeed and thrive? And even if it's at the threat of them leaving the company, like Tintin is literally now doing his own thing. And so is Saf. They're not part of the company anymore.
Ali's philosophy on this has always been, he would love it if people joined the company, stayed for a few years, and if they were entrepreneurially minded, then had the confidence to be able to go out and do their own thing. I know that was Saf was sort of one of the first people to sort of consciously make that leap last year in doing that, and it was probably more so on Saf's side in terms of hesitation than Ali encouraging him to do it. And so we've always had that mindset of, if people want to go and do their own thing, like that is just a natural evolution. And Tintin's another example where he'd been in a YouTube producer seat for like over 2 years. There's a limit to what you can really learn in that, and in that role to a degree. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you could, if you wanted to, just continue and I guess learn some more. But he wanted to do his own thing as well, and so we don't really hold people back from doing that. It's something that we kind of actively encourage. Ali doesn't stop people doing consulting or contracting on the side, as long as it doesn't impact the work that they're doing or isn't with like a competitor in the space.
Right.
And even then, it would be a polite conversation of just like, it's probably not best to do work with them rather than anything else. So and that's never happened either. It's very much like part of the culture that people probably would start to do their own thing on the side, and if that ends up becoming bigger than the main thing there with us, then that's fine. Yeah,
I like that. I've had conversations with people in the past where creators would say something like, oh, I'm afraid to train up this editor because after 6 months, if they know everything that I know, they're going to go off and do their own thing. And it sounds like you're saying, well, actually, that's kind of the point. Like, we want everybody on the team to thrive and succeed. And if they have entrepreneurial ambitions, they can go off and do it.
I always feel like that mindset is quite defensive. It's like you're trying to just retain, obviously you want to retain people as much as you can, and you want to kind of build up that culture and not just have a culture where people join for a bit, kind of rinse everything and then leave. Like, you don't want that, but at the same time, I think that is the extreme, and that is taking like a stance on it which is sort of set like a really negative outlook on it, rather than seeing, okay, I could actually train someone who, if they go on to work with someone else and they're known as my editor who now looks incredible, then it's going to attract more talent than it puts off. Yes, you don't want to have turnover of people leaving every 3 or 4 months. You do want people there for like, a year, 2 years. But I've never quite understood the anxiety around, they're going to learn everything then leave. Like, yeah, but that's, if you do it right, then it won't be a problem rehiring the next person.
Sure.
Especially if they leave on good terms and everything like that. So
yeah. And it kind of like leaves a really strong taste in everybody's mouth about the Ali Abdaal business and just the opportunity to potentially work for him and you and for the team. Like, it looks like a really nice reflection of what things should be like in this creator economy.
Yeah, and I mean, you've mentioned 2 people there, but there's been 3 or 4 people, Tintin's and Saf's, Tintin's especially, video went sort of semi-viral when he left the company.
They always make a video, I quit working with Ali Abdaal, and that's the one that kind of like kickstarts their work.
But again, they're all. I mean, I don't mind any of them making them, and they're all very positive. And Tintin's one especially, which was sort of the first one. I just found it quite entertaining, kind of reading the comments, people being like, "I came here for the gossip on Ali and didn't get what I expected." I'm like, and for me, it's just like a good job advert, really, or advert for working with us.
Definitely. If people are leaving and creating like videos that are saying, "Oh, I had such a great experience, I learned a lot, and now because of it, I'm able to go do my own thing," like, what does that say as a reflection of the company? It says only good things, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's free marketing for us.
Hey, we'll take it. We'll take it.
Yeah, exactly.
We're hiring right now. What do you look for across roles when you're looking to add someone to the team? Maybe it's a culture, personality type question more than specific skill sets.
I guess the slightly annoying answer is it depends. The culture piece is, to a certain extent, as important as the existing skill set. The sense that you get that there'd be a willingness and ambition to learn, I think. Mm-hmm. Because if someone is the right fit, but they're not haven't quite got the right skill set, they can always be trained, especially in the space that we're operating in, the creator space. There's a lot of skills which can be learned on the job, I would say. Even something like editing to a certain extent, although I wouldn't necessarily hire for a technical role where they didn't have the skills. But for other roles, I think there's a lot of space for learning and growth, and you just need to find the right ambition. I'm very bullish on that, partly because that's kind of what I did. And I was hired as a writer, and Ali just gave me more and more responsibilities and trusted me in that process. A lot of people underestimate the culture piece. And I think in terms of hiring more broadly, one thing that we've found very useful on a more tactical level is getting people to record looms as part of or videos as part of their application process. Because with AI and everything these days, anyone can put together a CV or a cover letter that sounds or cover letter especially, that sounds pretty convincing. So although we have them as optional and sometimes ask for them, I'm way more interested in sort of how someone comes across in their loom and the trial tasks that we always give people. Those 2 things are the things which I look at far more before even going to interview, because you can get so much and you can't really fake a loom. Well, I guess with AI these days you probably can, but you have to be pretty technical to be able to do that.
Sure.
So that's really what I base it on, because especially with such a small team, you can't have anyone that's not a culture fit, even if they don't quite have the skill set yet. And obviously if they can't learn, then that makes them not a culture fit, because we need the kind of people who are ambitious and proactive with their learning.
I actually love that. The loom idea is so clever, because that's the big outlier, right? You get 200 applications or 200 portfolio's to look at, and they're all varying degrees of good. But how do you know it's a culture fit? That is such a critical thing.
Yeah, and also putting a limit on the looms as well. It's often we either say 2-minute loom or whatever, and anyone who's over 2 minutes, it's just immediately just cut because they can't follow instructions. And so
Sure.
Even just doing that immediately helps and helps filter. And yeah, I think you attract the right people by doing that as well.
Mm-hmm.
In this very AI environment, what are you most looking forward to and least looking forward to?
Oh, good question. I'm kind of most looking forward to actually being able to leverage and understand AI automations and agents a bit more, to be able to make the business more efficient. And I don't mean that in the sense of I want to reduce headcount or anything like that, but I just feel there's so many more opportunities and there's so many unknowns. I don't even know where I could be leveraging it more, which is a weird place to be. Yeah, and so I'm most looking forward to really leveraging that way more and building it into the business a lot more. And I think one of the things I've been pushing people to do in their quarterly reviews that we had a few weeks ago was very much leaning into the AI side over the next few months. And I saw like Shopify's CEO and the other one that I noticed had put out a memo to their team that they shared on Twitter, basically being like, you need to learn how to leverage AI properly, otherwise you're just not going to kind of survive, not just in this business but in general. And I think it's pretty accurate. And so that's the thing I'm most looking forward to, is actually just like being able to leverage it a bit more. Least looking forward to, I think the thing that I find most frustrating is, and to be fair, companies are moving against it now, on YouTube especially in the last week or so as we're speaking, the rise of like this just quote unquote AI slop that is, I think it's a frustration that needs to be addressed in some way. I'm glad YouTube again have moved against it with sort of demonetizing a lot of AI content. But equally, having said all that, there has been some fully AI related created videos with Google's new VO thing on channels that I've seen that I've actually found pretty entertaining. So like there needs to be a bit of a balance, I think, but that's what I'm like least looking forward to. I just think there's going to be a proliferation of really crap content. I don't know if I can swear on this, but and so I think that's something which we will need to be mindful of. But at the same time, I think that presents an opportunity for anyone who's got a decent personal brand and can build up trust in their audience. As I mentioned earlier, I think there's kind of more opportunity for the real authentic connection than ever before, really. So yeah, whilst I'm not looking forward to there being AI slop, at the same time I think it increases the value of real content. So yeah,
thank you for being on the show. It's been very insightful hearing your side of things, and we'll have to have you as a guest again one day in the future.
Nice, thanks for having me.